late that evening, after the joint session had been reconvened, the vice president had given a statement to the nation saying that violence was not going to win, freedom wins, and that the people were going to get back to doing their work. Later that evening, Mr. Eastman emailed me to point out that, in his view, the vice president's speech to the nation violated the Electoral Count Act. But the Electoral Count Act had been violated because the debate on Arizona had not been completed in 2 hours. Of course, it couldn't be since there was an intervening riot of several hours. And that the speeches that the majority and minority leaders had been allowed to make also violated the Electoral Count Act because they hadn't been counted against the debate time. And then he implored me, now that we have established that the Electoral Count Act isn't so sacrosanct as you have made it out to be, I implore you one last time, Mr. Vice President, please do what we've been asking him to do these last 2 days. Suspend the joint session, send it back to the states.
He's actually talking about his email.
We'll show you the text of that email,
which
Dr. Eastman wrote at 11:44 p.m. on January 6th. So after the attack on the Capitol, and after law enforcement had secured the Capitol,
I don't have that
still
email.
wrote, as you described, quote, so now that the precedent has been set that the Electoral Count Act is not quite so sacrosanct as was previously claimed, I implore you to consider one more relatively minor violation and adjourn for 10 days to allow the legislatures to finish their investigations. So even after the attack on the Capitol had been quelled, Dr. Eastman requested, in writing no less, that the vice president violate the law by delaying the certification and sending the question back to the states. Is that correct, Mr. Jacob?
It is.
Did you eventually share Dr. Eastman's proposal with Vice President Pence?
Not right at that time, because the vice president was completing the work that it was his duty to do. But a day or two later, back at the White House, I did show him that final email from Mr. Eastman.
And what was Vice President Pence's reaction when you showed him the email where Dr. Eastman, after the attack on the Capitol, still asked that the Vice President delay certification and send it back to the states?
He said, that's rubber room stuff.
I'm sorry, Mr. He said it's rubber room stuff?
Yeah, look, yes, Congressman.
What did you interpret that to mean?
I understood it to mean that after having seen play out what happens when you convince people that there is a decision to be made in the Capitol legitimately about who is to be the president and the consequences of that, he was still pushing us to do what he had been asking us to do for the previous 2 days.
Yeah, it's all in his emails, okay? They read you this one sentence, okay, this one relatively minor violation, and it's out of an entire conversation about the back and forth of the legalities about doing this, right? It's all back and they're calling each other bullshit.
The number of electors appointed to vote for President of the United States is 538. Within that whole number, a majority is 270. The votes for President of the United States are as follows. Joseph R. Biden Jr. of the state of Delaware has received 306 votes. Donald J. Trump of the state of Florida has received 232 votes. The whole number of electors appointed to vote for Vice President of the United States is 538.
We remember all
and that
this.
whole number, a majority, is 270. The votes for Vice President of the United States are as follows. Kamala D. Harris of the state of California has received 300.
Yeah, gigantic mistake, obviously, as we have figured out here as Americans. But they just were taking that one sentence out of context, out of this entire email chain, which was actually filed as part of a document, 4 pages here. Emails back and forth between these two guys. Thanks, John. Call you. Is it unconstitutional for the ECA to eject members? They're having this conversation back and forth. Major new development back and forth. Looks like they're talking about the recertifications and what's going on with the different legislatures. He's referencing Lincoln. He says, John, very carefully, I'm just giving you my legal opinion. And he's saying, BS, this is BS. He says, and thanks to your bullshit, he says, and thanks to your bullshit, we're now under siege, is what this lawyer said. Okay, so this attorney is, he's got a different opinion. He says, I respect your heart, I share your concerns about what Democrats will do. I want election integrity fixed, but I have to run down now every legal trail, and I respectfully conclude that as a legal framework, it is a results-oriented position that you would never support if attempted by the opposition, and essentially entirely made up. And he says, then thanks to your bullshit, we're now under siege. And like they're having, very respectfully, I just don't in the end believe there's a single justice, right? These are all in emails. And he says, for the record, we're not in the middle, let me go back up. From Jacob over to John, I apologize for that language, it was unbecoming of me. And it's not reflective of a man whose wife and young children are currently glued to news reports about moving to safe locations, right? He's stressed, this is an email from Jacob. He says, but the advice provided, whether intended or not, functioned as a serpent in the ear of the President of the United States, and it turned into this big problem. I don't think you intended this result, but we're giving you clear debates about how this works. It was gravely irresponsible of you to give this president this academic theory, and I don't begrudge academics during debating the most far-flung theories. He says, I love doing it myself, and I view the Furman ideas as a good and helpful thinking, but this was not right? Advising the president here was erroneous, and he says that's a problem. John says, thanks for, this is John Eastman. He responds back to Greg now. Must be Greg Jacob. Is that who we're talking? Yeah, Greg Jacob. He says, with all due respect, the VP statements today claim the most aggressive position that had been discussed and rejected, right? Saying that the vice president's position, it sounds like they were having a debate about sort of the spectrum of options, and the vice president, Mike Pence, took the most one-sided perspective. Some believe that as vice president, I should be able to accept or reject, but we have been given a much more limited option, merely to adjourn, to allow the state legislatures to continue their work. I remain of the view not only would it have been the most prudent course, but also would have had a fair chance of being approved, at least not enjoined by the courts. Signed, John. John, did you advise the president that in your professional judgment the power does not have this? And he says here, the Senate, so when he's talking about that rubber argument, right, and I know this guy's going, let's see what he's talking about for a minute.
Are you out of your effing mind?
Effing mind, yeah. We already heard that clip. They played that one earlier today. They're playing the same clips over and over and over again because they want to beat our faces into the ground with this stuff. But here, John is responding, right? They're saying that when he said there's one relatively minor violation, that is affirmative, that they just know that this is indicia that he wants to break the law. If you're a defense attorney and you respond to this, you say, look, there are all sorts of laws that the House violates all the time. And this is what John Eastman is saying specifically. He says, look, the Senate and the House, they both violated the Electoral Count Act this evening. They debated the Arizona objections for more than 2 hours. Law says you can't do it. They did it. Violation. 3 U.S. Code 17. The VP also allowed further debate or statements after the question had been voted on. Another violation of the law. Title 3 U.S. Code 17. Also, they had debate upon motion approved by the VP in violation of U.S. Code Section 15. Here, after the vote was in separate houses, they shall immediately again meet. So what John Eastman is saying is violation, 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 violation. So what? So stop saying that my recommendation is a violation. It's not. It's just another sort of gray area, because this is how this all operates. And we have a history of this because we've looked at the Congressional Research Service and other documents that have supported the allegation that there really is, in fact, a lot of gray area here. They don't want you to think that. They want to sort of just paper all over this and say that it was very consistent and there's absolutely zero, wiggle room here. There's no ability to sort of thread the needle. That's not true. It is not as clear. Now, I do agree that the overwhelming majority of people, yours truly included, we read this and we still sort of thought that, yeah, maybe Trump's reading of this is a little bit gratuitous, and Mike Pence probably doesn't have all of these powers, but you could make the argument for it, right? It's not, my point is, it's not unequivocally illegal, okay? And when that's the case, there is arguments to be made by lawyers, and that is not insurrectionary. Like, I can't. If this type of behavior is insurrectionary, if this type of behavior is illegal, lawyers across America should be freaking out big time. Because this means if you're sitting there with your client and brainstorming about how to solve a legal problem that really pushes those boundaries, you now maybe be somebody who is going to be the subject of a fake select committee investigatory subpoena. I mean, for the love of goodness, we covered the Michael Sussman trial here. And what we saw there was, in my opinion, he was ultimately acquitted on this thing, but I think it was a wrongful acquittal. In my opinion, I think that there was a conspiracy conducted by the Democrats to try to change an outcome of an election, and they were in violation of multiple laws, and they were prosecuted for that in the regular court of law. And they still got acquitted because, of course, the DC jurors and how all this goes. But my point is that it's double standards. They're trying to make this seem like it's a foregone conclusion, and it really just isn't. This stuff is battled about all the time. Let's go back to this stupid hearing. Hopefully we're almost